I do want to start tonight, though, with probably one of the biggest stories of our lives. Kamala Harris in the White House. Our vice president is the first female vice president and is the first black vice president. I realize I'm not breaking any news right now, but I do want you to consider this. It's something I've been thinking a lot about today. There were people who voted for Kamala Harris in this election, and people who didn't, right? People who voted against her, voted for the other side. People who at one point in their life couldn't vote. Not because they were underage, but because the Voting Rights Act hadn't been signed yet in 1965, or their parents or their grandparents were flat out not allowed to vote at all because they were black or because they were a woman. They didn't get a say. And let me make this clear. This isn't about politics. I'm not talking about politics right now. You are fully allowed to disagree with our first female black vice president, Kamala Harris. That's fine. You can do that. What I'm talking about is progress. Seeing something that we weren't doing right, pivoting and heading in a better direction, and getting there. And we're going to keep that conversation going throughout the show tonight, right? We want to play some excerpts from this poem recited by Amanda Gorman at this morning's inauguration. She's the first ever National Youth Poet Laureate, and at age 22, the youngest poet ever at a presidential inauguration.
And yet the dawn is hours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one.
Yeah, we're going to hear more of that throughout the show. I love that. All right, let's move on to the big story, though, which is one of the other biggest stories of our lives. That's kind of a trend, 2020, 2021. Now, we're talking about the COVID vaccine, who can get it and why. And we say that because we've been getting dozens of tweets and emails like this one that we got from Scott. He said, "Hey, Dan, I just heard that Oregon is vaccinating anyone who wants a COVID shot at the Oregon Fairgrounds. First come, first served, no questions asked. What's up with that?" Well, we wondered what is up with that. And Krista Severance went and found out that, yes, this is in fact happening. And at least one expert says it really shouldn't be.
They're drawing up the vaccines, which are then administered over there.
The mass vaccination clinic in Salem is supposed to be for people in the 1A group. Healthcare workers, caretakers, people who live or work in long-term care facilities. But based on the emails and messages we've been getting, a lot of people outside of 1A are getting the vaccine there too.
And my wife and I are in our early 70s, and my wife has asthma, and I thought, what the heck, let's give it a try.
Brian Hines heard people outside of 1A could get the vaccine on Facebook.
When you showed up, were you truthful? I mean, did you tell them your age and, did they know that you weren't part of that 1A group?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the way it worked, there was a long line of cars, kind of like Disneyland. You wend your way around, you think you're up to the end, and then the line keeps going until you get under a covered building.
Hines, who wrote about his experience on his blog, said he and his wife signed up online. His wife told the National Guard member who they were and why they were there.
We wanted to be truthful, but also persuasive. So he said, "Are you a healthcare worker?" And she said, "No, but we're over 70. We have pre-existing conditions, and we have an appointment that we made through Salem Health's MyChart," which was all true. And I think he paused for a few seconds and said, "Okay, you're good to go."
Hines is far from alone. We've heard from a lot of people out of 1A who went to Salem and got the vaccine too. While Salem Health is explicit on their website that only people in that 1A group should go there to get the vaccine, the clinic does not require any ID to prove they qualify. A Salem spokeswoman also said some vaccines have been given to people out of 1A instead of throwing away doses, but she doesn't know how many. She said the self-attest system relies on the integrity of Oregonians to honor phasing guidelines.
It raises, enormous
health equity and justice considerations. And
Dr. Courtney Campbell is the director of the Medical Humanities program at Oregon State University. He said this priority system won't work if it's not strictly enforced.
And you don't want to have people sort of jumping the queue because then, people will feel resentment about not being able to access this particular facility, or they may feel that someone else is getting an unfair advantage over them.
Same goes for all the people in Oregon asking if they can drive to Washington to get the shot. Campbell said states were given vaccines based on population, and going to another state messes up the system.
It's a very scarce resource that's life-saving, and so it can't just be every person for themselves, okay? We need to really band around the common popular culture phrase, we're in this together. And being in this together means looking at the common good, not what's sort of how I can best get advantage.
Hines has no regrets, but said the system does seem unfair.
I'm happy I got the blog shot, the COVID shot, but there's a little bit of a feeling that there was some unfairness to it, which took some of the pleasure away for me.
Yeah, I mean, you're not a healthcare worker and everyone wants the vaccine. So yeah, do you feel bad? Do you feel like maybe you shouldn't have done it? Or are you glad that you did it?
I'm glad that we did it, partly because of my wife, partly because I have some, health problems. We answered all the questions, filled out the forms, so everything was done by the book. It just wasn't by the book according to Governor Brown's and the Oregon health authorities 1A priorities.
We reached out to Washington state health officials about this. They said they're not going to be checking residency, and people who live in Oregon and work in Washington may get it from their employer. Clark County officials were more blunt. They said if you live in Oregon, do not drive to Washington to get it. They don't have enough vaccines for everyone. What are your thoughts on this? We would love to hear from you. So many of you have already weighed in on Dan's Facebook post when he asked about this. So head to his Facebook page or use the hashtag HeyDan. We would love to know your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you to Kristen. This is an interesting one. Honestly, you might be sitting at home right now thinking, you know what? I'd skip the line in a heartbeat. Like so many people did comment and say on that Facebook post that Kristen just mentioned a moment ago. And while I don't personally agree with that, I do have a little bit of empathy. I mean, I can understand the fear and the anxiety. More people are dying every day. The numbers are skyrocketing, just as the experts said that they would. And I think of it like this. Since the first case, the first death hit the U.S. A year ago today, it took us 4 months to reach 100,000 deaths in May. Now, keep in mind, this was at a time when things were really out of control. Doctors were still trying to learn exactly how to treat this virus, how to treat people. We stayed on pace there. It took another 4 months, even though more people were getting sick, to reach 200,000 deaths in September of 2020. But then what happened? It was winter. The holidays, cases sped up, again, as experts said they would. This time it just took us 3 months to add another 100,000 deaths to the death toll. And in December of 2020, we reached that mark. 300,000 deaths. Well, it's been 1 more month at this point. 1 month to add another 100,000 deaths to get us where we are today at 400,000 dead in the United States. Now, in Oregon, COVID-19 has killed more than 1,800 people. Every one of those people has a unique story, their own families, their own passions, the things they loved. We want to share the faces behind those numbers. And tonight, Morgan Romero has Chris Martin's story.
He filled the room with his presence. We need more people like Chris.
Doug Martin looked up to his older brother, Chris.
He played such an important role in his communities, family and friends, that of teacher, a teacher of tolerance, love, caring, empathy, acceptance.
Life lessons.
Very warm, human.
People with Down syndrome often teach others.
Lovable, at times adorable.
Just had a great sense of humor and play. He was just very inexpressibly himself.
Chris loved to swim, run, jump, and competed in Special Olympics. 2 books were written about him.
Well, Chris was a gift to the world.
He served as acolyte at Kairos Milwaukee United Church of Christ, helping with ceremonial duties like lighting altar candles.
But there was a drum there, and he just decided that was part of his expression. And it became a very beloved part of worship. He would come in and immediately begin hugging people.
Pastor Jean Randall Bodman says the congregation missed Chris during the pandemic. The 68-year-old lived at a Rainbow Adult Living group home in Portland, a facility for people with disabilities.
They did such a good job of keeping that out of the house, and but I guess it was just bound to happen.
There were safety protocols, but Chris's brother believes someone without symptoms brought COVID in and exposed Chris. He developed a fever, diarrhea, cough, and eventually struggled to breathe.
The group home called me right away when they needed to send Chris to the hospital.
He tested positive for COVID. Within days, on December 3rd, Chris lost his life to pneumonia.
There was a day or two where it just seemed like he was getting better, and me knowing Chris, it's like he was going to be fine, and then so that it happened fast after that. It was just all of a sudden it just turned around, and there it was.
Doug lives in Washington. He hadn't seen his brother in a year.
Chris loved people in uniform, and he loved doctors, he loved nurses. If there was anybody to die in the company of strangers, it would be my brother, because there was hardly anybody that was really a stranger to him.
Since his passing, countless people have shared memories of Chris.
It's been quite something. Revisiting, thinking about Chris, and who he was and who he isn't now.
It helps in the grieving process.
He had a very full life. He was loved and loved a lot of people, and he contributed with his gifts. So
Morgan Romero.
That's a good life.
KGW News.
Okay, Morgan Romero joining us now. Morgan, we do these stories for a lot of reasons, but one is to get people to kind of look beyond the statistics and realize the people's lives that are being impacted here. But currently, right now, everybody should be paying very close attention to the statistics as well.
Yeah, the numbers are extremely harrowing, Dan. Here in Oregon and frankly nationwide, Chris Martin was one of at least 470 Oregonians who lost his life to COVID-19 in the month of December. And according to the Oregonian, nearly as many Oregonians died in December alone as in the first 6 months of the pandemic combined. So as you mentioned, it's critical to talk about the human toll of this virus, but it's also critical that we talk about the numbers. And as we look at the numbers trickling in for the month of January, it doesn't look good, Dan. So we're going to continue telling these stories. We'll have a series. You can find the stories here on The Story, as well as on our website, kgw.com.
Morgan, thank you.
Working from home can have its perks, especially if your home is this castle you just bought in Northwest Portland, where you make porn. Tonight's edition of Vice News introduces the swanky Forest Park to their new neighbors. And just because weed is legal in our state
enjoyed smoking something
doesn't mean you can smoke it in an Oregon senator's office, especially not after storming the Capitol. When the story continues.
Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew. That even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together, victorious. Not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision. Being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated.
So we're going to be playing, and we have been playing, different parts of that poem recited by the National Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman at the inauguration this morning. Please keep your comments and your questions coming. They don't have to be as well written as her stuff. Okay, don't worry about it. But just use that hashtag #HeyDan so we can see a lot of that stuff. And we have been seeing a lot of questions and comments about vaccines, including about the piece we ran in the first part of the show. So please keep those coming, and we'll keep sending you some answers. Now, if this is one of your first times watching the show, you should know that we have a couple of reoccurring segments on the story here, and sometimes we have this next one for stories that might be a little too seedy for your typical newscast, which brings us now to another edition of Vice News. And first up, let's meet the new neighbors in Forest Park. Two adult filmmakers just bought the so-called Blackberry Castle for a lot of money, nearly $4 million, and begs the question, who is still paying for porn? It's actually been on the market for 6 years now. According to the Oregonian, they're planning to use it as a fairy tale themed film set for videos, or as they put it, an adult Disneyland for content producers. The home is 13,000 square feet. It sits on nearly 6.5 acres. So, you know, if you do live nearby, I wouldn't worry too much. It seems like everybody's got a lot of privacy. Next up, another kind of local tie to the insurrection at the Capitol. Apparently, one of the rioters there decided to light up a joint in Senator Jeff Merkley's office, and now that person has been arrested. Bloomberg News found court documents that, quote, Brandon Fellows is saying, yeah, we went in there and then walked in, and there's just a whole bunch of people lighting up in some Oregon room. They were smoking a bunch of weed in there. And yeah, Merkley's office was trashed after the riot. He posted this video on Twitter once the Capitol was secured finally. He says someone also stole a laptop from his office. Now, speaking of Merkley, you might remember when he showed then Vice President Joe Biden around Portland. This was back in 2014. It included a trip to Salt and Straw. And it's something we thought, you know, while watching the inauguration this morning, you might want to see again. So we dug it out of the KGW vault. Take a look.
All right, and which one of those would you like on top, sir?
At Salt and Straw on Northeast Alberta, it's the assortment of flavors that leave customers grinning from ear to ear. On Wednesday, though, it was a surprise visit from Vice President Joe Biden.
Can you say why you picked this place?
I picked this place because Jeff recommended it. He said it's the best ice cream in town. And I'm an ice cream guy.
So what kind of ice cream does a self-proclaimed ice cream guy go for? Graveyard chocolate and double full vanilla. And a waffle cone, of course. In between bites, Biden chatted with Hope Lopkowitz and her young son.
Oh, it was great. It's awesome to see the Vice President here, and glad he's out here to support Jeff Merkley.
Senator Jeff Merkley and Vice President Biden took to the stage at the Oregon Convention Center to thunderous applause. When it quieted down, Biden called Merkley a real guy who hasn't forgotten his roots.
It's real easy to have that happen when you get down to Washington, where everything's yes, Senator, no, Senator, and there's people step aside and open doors for you. It's easy to actually think you're important.
But Merkley doesn't, according to the vice president. And that might very well explain the senator's re-election platform, promising to fight for the middle class and invest in infrastructure.
If we invest in infrastructure, not only we create a lot of good paying jobs right now, but we create a much better economy in the future, and that's a very positive thing for America.
Some will argue Salt and Straw is also a positive thing for America. Either way, the vice president got a taste of it before leaving town.
Hey, Salt and Straw, get some in the mail, man. 1600. You know the address. Hey, if you got any ideas for the vault, send them our way. Email the story at kgw.com. You can send me a message on Facebook. Lots of ways to get a hold of us. Now, I know we're supposed to avoid all this face-to-face contact right now, but sending a message in a bottle to a deserted island seems a bit much. We're going to finish the story right after this.
And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze not to what's Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Looking through some of your comments right now, people using the hashtag #HeyDan. We're going to read a couple of them in just a minute. In the meantime, hi, welcome back. Now, if you're like me, when you cross the equator while sailing the Pacific Ocean, I'm kidding, I've never done that, I can hardly swim, but a battleground teenager has. And it turns out there's some pretty unique ways to celebrate, doing this and making that crossing. Some people, they cross backwards. Other people, they throw a key into the water. I know it sounds a little strange, but it's like a tradition thing. Anyway, this teen decided to write a message in a bottle and then throw it overboard. She didn't know if it would wash up anywhere, but it did. Here's Devin Haskins.
With nothing but miles of ocean in front of them and years of mission work behind them, Nikki and her family were heading home when they crossed the equator.
A lot of beauty, nature. I mean, getting to see God's creation was just firsthand, right up and personal, was amazing.
It was late at night on January 8, 2019. Nikki was 17 at the time. She and a friend aboard their family's 54-foot-long sailboat, Sweet Dreams, each wrote a message, slipped them into a bottle, and dropped them both into the wide-open ocean.
We kind of did it as a commemorative, like, hey, we're crossing the equator, and just because, I don't know, we just wanted to, like, why not? Let's see what happens. It was kind of an adventure. I had no idea where it would go.
The bottles were dropped here, near the island of Nauru, right along the equator. And for nearly 2 years, it floated over 1,200 miles south, landing on a beach in the Conflict Islands, still intact. Conservationist Stephen Amos was cleaning up trash along the island's beach when he noticed the bottle with a note inside.
Yeah, I was excited because that's something like new to me. Seeing a message in a bottle, but don't know what was in there.
Nikki's message was a simple one. It wasn't a love letter or a treasure map.
Hello, my name is Nikki. I am a 17-year-old girl from the United States.
Instead, it was an oceanic pen pal note. She wanted to know who had found it and how far it had traveled.
This letter was written and thrown into the Pacific Ocean on January 8, 2019.
Never expecting the hands that would find it would be Stevens, part of a group that cleans up trash along the beach.
And as far as it getting found by a conservation group, I thought that was, I have to say, at first I felt a little guilty. I was like, oh no, I probably should have thrown a bottle in. But I figured it was helpful that it was glass. And then it was also really neat that they were able to find it because it was glass.
The conservation group posted the letter on Facebook, and within hours, the two were connected. It's the friendship of two strangers brought together with one letter thrown into the ocean. Devin Haskins, KGW News.
Is it equator? I always thought it was, I always went short. I always went equator. So the equator. I guess it's equator. I've never crossed it, so I guess that they would know better than me. Hey, let's talk about some emails here. Somebody wrote and said, hey, Dan, if they start enforcing the vaccine guidelines, will the jumpers, right, the people who are not necessarily in the groups that are supposed to be getting the vaccine but are getting the vaccine, will they get their second shot? As far as we know, yes. So regardless of whether you're supposed to be getting it or not, when you get it, as soon as you get shot A, they put shot B aside in Oregon. They put it on the shelf with your name on it. So there's never a situation where somebody has to, misses that second shot because they haven't planned for it. And it says, somebody else, Gail, wrote in and said, the vaccinations have been out for 1A folks for nearly a month. If they haven't gotten theirs by now, I'm glad to take their place in line. Again, that's not really where I stand on this, but a lot of people have been weighing in and saying that. Darla is a little angry at the state. She said, OHA, nothing is being done to enforce vaccine eligibility. Why waste your time and open yourself to controversy, open yourself up to that, if you're okay with a vaccine free-for-all? So we're trying to ask them a little bit about that as well, because you heard from one of the experts we talked to tonight saying that if it's not enforced, if people aren't paying attention to it, the house of cards can crumble a little bit. So we're going to keep on this topic. And then Jack writing in and saying, I think you should take a step back from the shaming and blaming approach to COVID vaccination coverage. Our central problem is the slow pace of vaccination. Pitting one group against another likely slows the pace, doing more harm than good. So We're not trying to pit anybody against each other. We're trying to ask questions and hold people accountable. At the end of the day, I don't want to keep using the cheesy quote that we're all in this together, but we are. And we just want to make sure that the people who are getting these vaccines, rolling them out, the people who are supposed to get them are doing so in a way that we all know about, right? Because I think that we all deserve to have this information. So please, we're not trying to get anybody to fight with each other. We're just trying to make sure everybody's informed as we move through this process. But please keep the questions coming. Keep using the hashtag HeyDan. That's the story for tonight. I'll see you back here tomorrow.